What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. Joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor and copy editor Shayne Kubas, and we're going to talk some Steelers football predictions here, Shayne. As we enter the slow stretch of the NFL calendar year, second week of OTAs, we do have some notable quotes to talk about from assistant coaches. Just came in today, so we'll discuss those first, and we're going to get to our salary cap breakdown of the Steelers, their roster breakdown. What does their summer roster look like? And at the end of today's show today, we are going to give our way too early 53-man roster prediction. Shayne, I'm willing to bet, though, we can get 49, 50 of those names right. Like even right now, it was pretty easy to put together a roster prediction. Obviously, things can change throughout the summer, though.
Yeah, there'll be some things on the fringes that one or both of us will probably end up having wrong, whether it's because they add somebody that we're not familiar with right now being on the team, or they just, someone surprises in training camp. But for the most part, I think a lot of the names we're going to talk about, especially even some of the ones that maybe we have right off the roster, will probably be the ones to make it if we are wrong about a lot of these. So.
All right, and if you are joining us for the first time, make sure you get that live chat hopping here as we are in the show. Leave us a like and a comment. Please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. We would love that. We also just started our Still Curtain TikTok channel. You can go check that out over on TikTok as well. We've got short video content for you there as well. All right, Shayne, let's talk about some of the coaches' comments as the Steelers media caught up with them today. Raymond Chinyoung, the Steelers running back coach, spoke about Eli Heidenreich, who has already become a fan favorite thanks to what he was able to do in college, his whole story and background. All-time leading receiver for Navy. And this is what he had to say about the Steelers' seventh-round rookie. Eli has been in my room, the running back room, every day, and he is a Swiss Navy knife. Nice little play on words there. I told him to patent that. Great kid. Does a great job of just meshing with the guys, relationships, but also taking time to learn the scheme, identifying where he fits. He's been awesome for us. And so obviously, just nothing but glowing praise for Heidenreich. Chinyoung really seems impressed with what he has been able to do so far at OTAs and since arrival in Pittsburgh. But I think the most notable thing here, Shayne, is it very much seems like he is a running back for the Steelers. And he did call him the Swiss Navy knife here. And so maybe he will wear multiple hats. But the fact that he's been in that running back room and working with the running backs every day, I do think is somewhat telling.
Yeah, and to me, and again, like it's early, it's OTAs. I don't want to say that it's a good or bad thing for anything that's happening right now, really, right? It's just kind of hard to really say that with any sort of conviction at this time. But I don't know if I love that, frankly. I don't really view him as a guy that fits as a true running back. And I know he's not really going to be that regardless of what room he's in. And maybe they feel they want him to be better at carrying the football. They want that to be an element of his game more. And that's fine. But I think his path to playing time and to making this roster has to come through his pass catching ability, and more so not just out of the backfield, but as potentially like a slot receiver type, because that was what he was really best at Navy, was being an actual receiver, not an actual running back. So it's fascinating. It's a little too early to say for sure what it means, but I do think that on the surface, I'm not sure if I personally love the idea of him spending most of his time in the running back room.
Yeah, Shayne, and you and I discussed that shortly after the draft. We both agreed that he is a better receiver than he is a running back. Now I want to see what he can do as like a true route runner. Can he manipulate coverages from the slot, all that kind of stuff. We do know that he could stretch the field from the slot and that he was a really good receiver in college, netted him over 92 PFF grades in back-to-back seasons and all-time Navy leading receiver. And so that's where he did the majority of his damage. Never had as much as 500 rushing yards in any of his seasons while being a much more productive and efficient in the receiving game. So I'm interested to see what he would look like as a running back, but I also wrote an article on why his body type, his skill set, everything is more suited to be an NFL receiver, primarily an NFL slot receiver. I mean, he's got that type of body type. He's got some yak ability. He's got some field stretching ability from that position. I do worry about having a little bit of a narrow frame and how is he going to be able to break tackles running between the tackles. And with Jaylen Warren and Rico Dowdle there's a lot of mouths to feed already, not to mention Caleb Johnson. We'll talk about him in our 53-man roster predictions here. I do think the avenue is much easier at receiver But I think we can't ignore Raymond Chinyoung's comments on Heidenreich, where it very much seems like he's more of a running back than a receiver at this point in time. Now, that's not to say he didn't flat out come out and say he hasn't been in the receiver room at all. He just said he's been with the running back room every day.
Right.
I take that still. I believe just overall feel of things that he's more of a receiver than a running back right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see ultimately what happens with him, but I would like to see more reports of him working with the receivers, just because even though that's what he's best at now, and you'd think that, okay, well, maybe he should work on some of the running back stuff if they want him to play that position. He needs to learn how to play real NFL receiver, and that Navy offense wasn't exactly, NFL pro style is all I'll say. I think we all kind of know that with the Navy. So I'm curious to see where it goes from here and how they try to utilize him in practice, because obviously that's where he's going to get his reps and how he's going to learn. But it's just, we'll say it's fascinating for now, I'd say.
Yeah, an interesting player to say the least, and we'll absolutely keep tabs on what it looks like for him moving forward. I mean, we get into training camp, it'll be really exciting because we'll actually be able to see where is this guy lining, what's the plan for him, is he running with the second team, third team, where is he, and how do the Steelers view him? But for now, this is the information that we have. Chinyoung also spoke on Jaylen Warren and Rico Dowdle, the two-headed monster, if you will, of the Steelers backfield this year. Obviously, the Steelers no longer have Kenneth Gainwell, who was the dump-off champion of Aaron Rodgers last year.
Yep.
Ended up leading the team in receptions. And so there's a lot of targets and receptions that could theoretically go to somebody else this year. But what does it look like in terms of the carries in the backfield? Well, we've got a little bit of insight to that. And so Chinyoung, the running back coach, spoke on this combination and said, when it comes to Jaylen and Rico, Coach McCarthy will define that. He wants two fresh backs at all times. And that's not hard to figure out why you would. And we kind of predicted, Shayne, that the split would be maybe close to 50-50. I mean, these guys, I would slot them in the same talent tier based on what they've done the last 2 years in the NFL. Dowdle's been a back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher, both of the Cowboys and most recently the Panthers. Warren is capable of being a 1,000-yard rusher if given a big enough sample to do that. I don't think either will get there, and I'm sure we'll do like a season stat prediction closer to the NFL season, but I think more of these guys will probably both end up in like the 750 to 850 yard range, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think the idea that he wants two fresh backs makes total sense. One, because you just want that in the NFL. If you don't have like one of the top 2 or 3 or maybe 4 running backs in the league, a lot of the time you don't want those guys to have more than 250 carries, for example, right? Because you wear down, it shortens their career to some degree. Like, you don't want to have to do that unless it's just clear that you should be giving that guy that many touches. I think you don't sign Rico Dowdle to give him 5 carries a game. Right. Like that's the ultimate thing here is you don't sign a guy that's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons and who looked very good in doing so if you don't plan on giving him the ball to some degree. Right. So those who are a fan of Jaylen Warren and want to see him get the full workload, I get it. I'd be fascinated by that. I think it's probably better for all parties if that doesn't happen, though, realistically, right? So we'll see. And I think Warren might have the most touches he's had in his career this year, mostly because I think he is going to be the recipient of a lot of those passes, in my opinion. So more so than Dowdle, at least. So that could be where he shines more so than ever. But I do think both are going to be in that 150 to 200 carry range. Like you said, that 750, 800 yards range. Like that's kind of what I'm expecting from both of them.
Yeah, and I do think that this is the right approach. If you're wondering, like, should one guy get the vast majority of the touches? I think you can count on one hand the amount of running backs in the NFL who should be considered true workhorse backs at this stage of their careers. I think you need to be one of the best backs in the league. You need to be a tier above the rest. The drop-off needs to be so significant from RB1 to RB2 that you don't ever want to take that guy off the field. And that's just not going to be the case with Warren and Dowdle. That's a good thing. I think the Steelers have 2 really good running backs. If one were to get injured, obviously I think you would see a tremendous spike in the other's production. But the Steelers in recent years, I think we go back to 2024 with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, there was no third running back that touched the football.
Yeah, and literally no one played. Like it didn't exist.
Yes, not in terms of carries. So it's wild, the distribution that they had like poured into their top 2 guys. I don't know if that will remain because, again, we're talking about a new coaching staff. Mike Tomlin's not here, new running back coach. It could look very different in terms of the distribution. But based on Chinyoung's early comments here, we can expect to see these two guys, one of these two guys on the field, the vast majority of the time, getting a pretty even split of the touches here.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about one more quote that came out just recently before we started this show, and that's wide receivers coach Adam Henry on Jeremy Bernard. He is impressed with the second round pick, and not to be surprised by this, because what is one of the things that we said about Bernard? I think he is pro ready. I think he's a really smart and savvy football player who can wear a lot of hats. And this is what Henry had to say on Bernard. Every day is a learning experience right now, but the most important thing that I'm satisfied with right now is his growth, his learning the offense, his football IQ of knowing multiple positions. And usually that's the hardest transition. So good comments there from Henry. It's encouraging stuff about Bernard. It's kind of stuff that we expected to hear from him. I think our questions with Bernard isn't necessarily, is he going to be pro ready? Is he going to be able to play inside, outside? I think we all believe that he's going to do that from day one. Even the questions about Bernard's always been more about long-term. What does it look like? Is he a wide receiver 2? Is he only a wide receiver 3? What's his ceiling? What's his potential? Kind of plays like an average athlete at times on the field. And so good stuff though, knowing that he's at least on track of where he should be at this stage of his rookie career.
Yeah, and I think what Henry said is exactly what, like you said, we expected to hear about Bernard as we kind of get into the first wave of practices and first time these guys are on the field. He is one of those guys who knows how to play multiple positions. He was asked to do so many things at both Washington and Alabama that it's not a surprise that he is picking things up quickly, is learning the offense.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the idea that, and I wrote about this, not long ago, actually, for stillcurtain.com. I think it was Bleacher Report, if I'm not mistaken, was talking about, things that teams should be doing before the season starts and moves they still need to make. And talked about adding a receiver. And I disagreed with that because I feel like you don't draft Jeremy Bernard in the second round, a player that is not a developmental athlete. He's not this guy that needs time to get settled into an NFL role. He's a guy that you want to get on the field as soon as possible because there might not be a ton more to get out of him, but he's already a good player and you should be trying to get the value out of him as soon as you can. So I expect him to be this team's third receiver. We've talked about that. There's no reason to think that's not the case at this point, unless, someone like Roman Wilson somehow breaks out at this point, which would be great for the team, but I'm not expecting that at this point. And I think he's going to be a very productive player for this team as early as this year, if him and Aaron Rodgers, of course, which that's a whole other discussion. But if all I'm saying is if Jeremy Bernard can't get on his good side as a rookie, I don't know what type of receiver can, frankly.
Yeah.
So this is the prototype of if you were drafting a rookie to play with Aaron Rodgers, this is the type of guy you want to draft. So we'll see if that plays out, but he should be effective right away.
Yeah, and honestly, again, you touched on it already. This is one of the benefits of Jeremy Bernard is that he is or should be a pro-ready rookie. In fact, of the first 4 draft picks the Steelers made this year, Yonicher, Bernard, Drew Aller, and Dalen Everett. You can even throw Jennings Dunker in there because he's going to have to learn a new position. So the first 5 guys, Bernard should be, and I think we all expect him to be the most pro-ready of that group because of his college experience and what he should theoretically be able to offer from day one. Now, is he going to be in a completely full-time role? No, not unless the Steelers are in 11 personnel and 100% of the time, and I don't expect them to do that. Probably. More so than what they were under Tomlin, obviously. Yeah. But I do think he plays at least a prominent role in the offense and significant snap usage from the gate. And so good stuff from Adam Henry on Bernard, stuff that we like to see there. All right, you are tuned into the Still Curtain podcast where Steelers fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up stillcurtain.com, powered by the passionate fans at Fansided. Please leave us a rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts and check us out on TikTok as well. All right, Shayne, let's break down the Steelers' current summer roster as we know of it right now, the salary cap situation, and then we'll discuss the roster before we head into our prediction. So let's start with the salary cap. And the latest figure we have here, now that Aaron Rodgers is signed, the Steelers had to rework Pat Freiermuth's contract. The latest cap figures from Over the Cap have the Steelers sitting at $4.3 million, just a little bit over that right now. It's one of the lowest in the league. And actually, their effective cap space, Shayne, is still, it's actually in the negative now after the Rodgers contract, negative $1.348 million, which means that when all these guys are signed, you get the whole rookie class signed, the Steelers are actually going to be a little bit over the cap. This team typically likes to run 6 to 8 million in cap flexibility heading into the season. In the event of injuries, they need to go out and sign a veteran to fill a role. And so they still have some more finagling to do here. And I believe that this is with Pat Freiermuth's recent contract renegotiation as well, where they kind of move some cap back. Right now, as of 2026, Freiermuth has a small cap number. They push some of that money into the future, which also means that they certainly can't get rid of him this year. They're not going to, but it would result in a $14 million dead money hit. Even next year, for an $8.4 million dead money hit, and it would only be a $5.7 million cap savings. So the earliest now with the restructure, the earliest that you can get out of Freiermuth's deal and not lose a significant chunk of money would be the 2028 offseason. So this locks Freiermuth to the team for at least 2 more seasons, and he probably would have been here for that stretch anyway, so not a ton of damage done here. The thing that is frustrating, Shayne, is you go over to Spot Rack and you look at the cap hits the Steelers have taken, and it kind of stings a little bit because in 2026, they are eating $6.855 million for Minkah Fitzpatrick since he was traded on that deal that he signed previously before that. They're eating nearly $4 million in dead cap space for Jonnu Smith, who was just atrocious last season.
Yeah, well.
And then, ironically, Cameron Johnston, who's their current punter now, they cut him for Corliss Waitman last year, and so they're eating almost $1 million there in Cameron Johnston's deal, even though he's back on the roster again and is projected to be Pittsburgh's punter this year. So that money obviously could have got the Steelers out of the hole, given them some breathing room. Everybody has dead cap space. I believe the Steelers are only 26th in dead cap space in the NFL. So it's not like these monstrous numbers here.
No,
do way worse. It's not like a Russell Wilson with the Broncos situation where
Dolphins
you pay
right
$85 million to get rid of a guy.
Familiar with, so at least you're not the Dolphins or anything like that.
Yeah.
The cap situation, I think it's fine because again, once they get their rookie signed, like there's a multitude of things they could do. I think they're going to restructure DK's deal because he has a 31 million cap number right now, and that could easily be changed up if they wanted to. I think they could do that. Obviously, there's other things that they can do. They could do, for example, if they want to keep Highsmith around long term, which I don't expect them to, but if they do still want to do that, they could, extend him, and then that would free up some of his cap space this year. Probably they could do. There's a bunch of ways, like every other team does, that they can make the cap space work and have some wiggle room going into the season in case they want to make any moves or do anything like that. So,
yeah, and I mean, I've heard whispers. Herbig is one of the guys that they would really like to get done. Obviously,
yes.
I mean, for obvious reasons. And I wouldn't be shocked if we hear of a few of those extensions. People might ask, well, how can you don't have the finances to do that right now after Aaron Rodgers signed and they took a big chunk of that all at once in that 1-year deal, which I'm glad that they didn't tack on the void years. There's no chance you should ever do that for a quarterback at his age in the state of this roster where we know that realistically the window is not right now for the Steelers. It might be 2-3 years from now. But I do think there are ways to get this done. You can obviously, if you were to extend a player like Nick Herbig, even as rich as that deal might be, you can take lower cap numbers in the first few seasons, kind of backload that deal. Obviously, the salary cap goes up every year, and so that gives you some flexibility to work with there. Nothing to report on right now, but maybe, hopefully, within the next few weeks here, maybe there's something we do hear about an extension, either Herbig or Washington or Joey Porter Jr., a name that they would obviously love to get done. Keanu Benton. I mean, they had a really strong draft class in terms of the 2nd through 4th round was awesome. So I would love to keep all those guys. We'll see what they ultimately end up doing there.
Yeah, I do think Benton, unfortunately, if we're talking about extension candidates, is the one that probably is the least likely.
Be the odd man out there.
And I hate that, but also probably like that for him personally, because I think he needs to go to a team that, doesn't think he's a nose tackle, because he's not. Yeah. Maybe that'll be different this year. We'll see how they use him. And if that happens, then that's the problem, though, is if they do start using him a little bit more effectively, he might price himself out of their market. So that becomes an issue too. So we'll see. But
and Patrick Graham's he's been flexible over the years, but most recently, as the defense coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders, he's like to have 4 down linemen, including his edge rushers, with playing hand in the dirt and having two true interior defenders And so maybe that would kind of switch things for the Steelers a little bit. He also likes to run nickel quite frequently. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens here. And maybe he does get a positional tweak at the very least. I'm sure the Steelers are still going to want to run that 3-4 defense.
Yep.
We'll see how much they're actually in that base, though, and that can kind of dictate the type of season that Benton could have here.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the roster as it stands right now, Shane. And even though the Steelers don't look all of a sudden super flexible in terms of their finances right now, they do have 95 players under contract on their 90-man summer roster. I believe that's actually 91 men
91.
when you factor in the international player who is allowed to be on the roster and not count against the team's roster. So obviously the Steelers are going to have to find a way to go from 95 down to 53 by the start of the season. You got 45 players on your active game day roster. And so, I mean, we're talking about 40% of your roster being cut by the end of the summer. We're going to get to that in just a second. So let's kind of run through the positions really quickly, Shane, and we'll kind of just give our overall synopsis of each positional group. How do we feel about them right now? Where do we think they are just arbitrary number, like in comparison to the rest of the league? Because that's kind of what matters here. You can be better than you were in the past at a particular position, but if you're still not there, if you're not on par with the rest of the league, that's your competition. Those are the 31 teams you're going against.
Yep.
And so I think that's really important. So let's start here with the quarterback position. Obviously, the four guys in this group, very well known to the public. There's been tons of discussion about that. And that's Aaron Rodgers, Will Howard, Mason Rudolph, Drew Aller. If we're going historical data here, not just with the Steelers, but with new head coach Mike McCarthy as well, the Steelers are only going to keep 3 quarterbacks. I would be very surprised if that wasn't the case. Maybe someone has a minor injury, Drew Aller or Will Howard, and they find a way to sneak them on the IR early in the season. I just don't know if that's going to be the case this year. Howard already missed all of last season, doesn't have so much as a preseason snap under his belt. And so he's either the guy or he's not. But those are the 4 names. I've heard some people say, well, if you look at that group, it's not so bad. It's kind of, they got depth there at least. And the problem that I would say that is, yes, although the NFL used 50, 60 quarterbacks last year. I mean, there's a lot of backups that had to play. You can only play one quarterback at a time. And so it really doesn't matter how good your QB3 and QB4 are. They might be better than the rest of the league's QB, or at least more promising than the rest of the league's QB3 and QB4. But those guys in 90% of the situations are not going to ever have to see the field. So you're really only as good as your starter. And that's where we are with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, this is I'll say bottom 7 group in the league. A quarterback is probably where I'd place them. Like, I think there's at least 24, 25 situations I'd rather have as things stand right now.
Yeah.
And that just, again, like, we're starting with quarterbacks because it's the first position you start with, but that kind of already puts a cap on you. And that's where the Steelers have been for a long time. And that's kind of the issue, right? Is we can talk about the rest of this roster. And honestly, for the most part, outside of a couple spots, I'm mostly going to have good things to say about this roster. But when you start off where we're starting off, it kind of dampens things and it illustrates where we're kind of at and what the issues that we're dealing with here.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, the quarterback position, if the Steelers go down swinging this year and fall short, it's probably going to be because of the quarterback position. Yep. Can't rule out a few others. Like off-ball linebackers, pretty weak as well. You and I were not a fan of bringing Patrick Queen back for another season, but the Steelers felt like they were kind of short of options there.
Yeah.
But quarterback, I would say, I mean, we're just throwing it out there, is one of their worst positional groups. And the downfall of that is it's such an important positional group. And so if you only have the 25th or 23rd at best quarterback situation, that's not on par with the rest of the league. It's not even average right now. So we're hoping that even in his old age, Rodgers can somehow take a step up, at least in terms of efficiency, being with Mike McCarthy. But again, this is age 43 season we're talking about here. Only one quarterback sees the field at a time. The biggest overall talking point at the quarterback position right now is who is going to be the odd man out. We'll get to that in just a minute with our roster predictions. Running back room. Better or worse than last year? I know that Kenneth Gainwell was very involved. First half of the season was okay. Second half, he heated things up, was effective in the passing game, was used often there, and even effective as a runner, which obviously I think he had a bigger season than any of us would have expected, coming from an Eagles team where he kind of didn't do a whole lot in his 4 seasons there, going from Gainwell to Rico Dowdle now. I just flat out think that Rico Dowdle is a better runner and overall more talented player. Maybe not that same type of pass catcher, but we also didn't know that Gainwell was that type of pass catcher until he played with Aaron Rodgers and he just kind of checked everything down to him. I like the running back room as it stands. I do not believe at all that they need to add to this room. They already did that with the Rico Dowdle signing. I thought that was a very respectable signing. You have that two-headed monster. As long as neither Warren or Dowdle gets injured this summer, I'm very comfortable going into the season with this group. The question is here, Shayne, 3 running backs or 4. Does Caleb Johnson keep his job? I mean, he's only entering year 2 as a 3rd-round pick and a guy that was pretty high. I think he was 53rd in the consensus board.
Yep.
It'd be hard to imagine him getting cut this early, but it's not impossible because you also have Travis Homer there, who has just been an absolute special teams ace over his career with the Seahawks, most recently with the Bears. A guy that maybe we would expect to make the roster. I'm interested to see what you have to say about that as well. But what are your overall thoughts on the running back room?
I think overall it's better than last year. I agree with you that Dowdle is just a overall better player than Gainwell is. I think you can replace a lot of what Gainwell brought in terms of the pass catching with Jalen Warren and maybe some other guys here that can, maybe it becomes Eli Heidenreich if he is good and makes the roster or whatever. But I think from a running standpoint, you're definitely more talented. And I think this is one of those running back groups that is not going to be limited by the talent in the room. It's only going to be limited by the play calling and the blocking. Like, you should get above average play from this group, assuming everything else is good. And that's where you want to be at a minimum in the NFL. Like, you don't want to have a good offensive line, have a good play caller, have a good scheme, and the running backs just aren't talented enough to make good on it. That's not the case here with the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we should mention Eli Heidenreich. I see the comment there in the chat as well. If they view him at the end of the day as a running back, where does he slot in? Do they make a kind of a historic outlier exception and say, we're going to keep 4 or 5 running backs even on this? You have to cut somewhere else. And maybe they view him as a versatile enough piece that you could say this is either our running back or our wide receiver. Wherever we're short there, he'll kind of fill in the gaps. And I'll be interested to see what happens there. Now, I want to see if he makes your initial 53-man roster because I've got an interesting take on that as well. We'll get to here in a minute. Let's talk about the wide receiver room, Shayne. There's no question that this group is better on paper than it was. Now, DK Metcalf getting a little bit older. I would say, at least in terms of his potential, he's maxed out. I mean, he's 29 years old, entering age 30 season. Michael Pittman's going to be 29 years old this season. We know who these guys are now. There is no secret, despite Metcalf being always second season with the Steelers. Pittman's just getting here. Maybe he can kind of bounce back. We know who these guys are. I mean, we've seen them long enough in their careers. We know who they are. Having said that, Michael Pittman is astronomically better even at this stage of his career. And I'm not the biggest Pittman fan, but he's so much better than Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who had absolutely no business being on NFL rosters. None whatsoever. I mean, they were so beyond washed last year. They didn't add anything to this team outside of maybe a couple of big catches combined. There was nothing else to get excited about with those guys. And that's why I just wanted them to just flat out at least play Roman Wilson, see what you had in him. Maybe the window's already closed or closing rapidly on Wilson and the opportunities that he's going to have here down the stretch. But with Pittman here, with Jeremy Bernard, I mean, that already, it stands to reason this is a better group right now. Maybe Heidenreich will be considered this group at the end of the day if he makes the Steelers roster. Ben Skoranek there, special teams purposes. What do you make of this group overall? How does it compare to the league, which is, again, most important question here? And do you agree that it is better than last year?
Well, it's definitely a lot better than last. I mean, it was getting real sad at the end of last season, especially. Like, I'm not saying Calvin Austin is like amazing or anything, but when he wasn't out there, it was noticeable, and that's not good.
Yeah,
like that's just not where you want to be at if you're missing Calvin Austin, and it all kind of looks bad. So yeah, it's absolutely better. I think the hope is that you have 3 quality number 2 level players here. And because I think DK has been more than that in the past, but I think he's never been much more than a low end 1.
Yeah,
I think he's
agreed.
firmly a 2 at this point, ideally in his career. I think obviously Pittman has been a 2, has been kind of a pseudo 1. I think he's firmly like that big body number 2 type of player too. And then Jeremy Bernard. Like, what can you get out of him as a rookie? How good is he? Is he a true, like, he's going to be the third receiver, but is he at that level of player, or is it just because of the, how the veterans are playing and everything else? He's the third target getter, whatever it may be. But that's what you hope, is you have at least that level of player in 3 spots, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to really rank them across the league because in general, the weaponry in the league is really good.
Mhm.
Like, having 3 players who all I think are all capable of being like quality number 2 players sounds really good. But I think when you compare it across the league, it's not that great. Like, I think they're
Yeah.
probably at best middle of the pack in terms of receiver talent right now, which is fine. Because again, this was a bottom 5 unit last year.
Mhm.
So it's a huge step up either way. But this should be a much improved group. And that's without assuming that Roman Wilson can do anything. With Ben Skowronek offers stuff as a run blocker, and sometimes he'll catch every so like it looks good when he catches passes. I don't know if they just don't want to throw him any, which is fine, but like it kind of looks good usually when he gets the ball thrown to him. So yeah, I think that group
Yeah.
should be a lot better this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think middle of the pack is a good way to describe it. It's just such an advantage when you are one of those teams that has a true wide receiver one. It's like, I
Yes.
can throw to this guy every time. CeeDee
Until
Lamb
it
or
tilts the
Justin Jefferson,
field
like,
too.
yeah, you can throw to them every time. The Steelers don't have that guy. And I'll be really interested to see, this is a different conversation, but how the target distribution looks this season, because I can see it pretty evenly spread here between their top 3 or even 4 targets. If you throw maybe Freiermuth in there, I'm interested to see what tight end McCarthy wants to use most frequently, because history would tell us he kind of prefers the Freiermuth type over the inline Y tight end like Darnell. And so a lot of questions that we can diagnose here for a different show, but I agree. I think middle of the pack right now is a good way to put it. The tight end room, Shayne, the Steelers lost Jonnu Smith and Connor Hayward. And so in terms of depth, you can definitely argue that it's worse. They still kept by far and away their top 2 players, which is Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth. They added Riley Nowakowski to that group. And so I think maybe a good way to put it is that the depth is suddenly very thin at the position, and you're kind of one injury away from saying, all right, now I've got either Washington or Freiermuth playing a true like full-time role and hardly anybody else seeing the field. I'm interested to see if this is a position where maybe they go out and sign a 4th guy, a veteran who can at least add some depth and security to the position in the event of an injury, or at the very least have someone on standby ready to bring up in the practice squad who they trust.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see, because I think if they are going to add someone who's like firmly a rosterable player at this point, that someone we would expect to make the roster, I would think tight end is one of the spots that you have to rank pretty high for that likelihood.
Yeah.
Even though I do like Nowakowski as a tight end as well as an H-back, fullback type, I think he can play, not necessarily in line a lot, but I think he can be an actual tight end for you enough that being the third tight end, and then also that kind of Swiss Army knife, not Swiss Navy knife, I guess, be that type of guy in the backfield and do some of that stuff. I think that's fine. But I wouldn't be surprised if a 4th tight end that's not one of the undrafted players that they added, which we'll talk about that later. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an addition there for sure.
Yeah, and this is a position where I'm not opposed to keeping 3 with a 4th on standby on the squad, just because like, if you truly are intending to run a lot of 11 personnel, this is a corner you might be able to cut in to make sure that perhaps a more talented player gets on the field. And we'll talk about that, because I've got a prediction here that I don't love, but again, I'm trying to do it a prediction as to what the Steelers might do.
Right.
So I would consider cutting a corner here if I was the Steelers to keep a more talented player, or a player with potentially more upside or more to offer. Let's talk about the offensive line here. For my money, Shayne, this is the most promising group, maybe even in 2026, but particularly for the future. I'm saying 2027 and beyond. Very, very excited about the direction of the offensive line after adding Max Ionichur and Jennings Dunker to this group that I already really liked. the combination of Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, potential. I mean, we're talking about a potential line who could be together for the foreseeable future, kind of learn and grow together, build that chemistry. Big guys, some powerful interior guys, some quick-footed tackles. A lot to get excited about in this group. And obviously the big question here, Broderick Jones, like, what does his future look like? This might be it for him. And we don't even know if he's going to be healthy enough to start the season on the active roster.
That's kind of the rub, and we'll get to that with our roster breakdown. I will spoil that I do have Broderick making the roster, but with the asterisk that he might be on the PUP list to start, and that someone else would then theoretically have to replace him for the time being. But again, like, that is one of the big questions, because whether he's going to be in the mix for a starting role, even if he's healthy, is kind of up in the air. But he is at least really good depth compared to the rest of the league if he's healthy, right?
Yeah.
So I have no reason to think that, unless they trade him or something, which is, I guess, possible too, there's no reason to think he won't make the roster if he's healthy. It's just, what is his role going to actually be for this team? But you're right. Like, this is the most promising from, start to finish, whether you're looking at the depth, the starters, the rookies. No group has the upside that this group has on the roster, especially looking into the future, right? Because you could argue, like, I would still say edge is this team's best overall position, probably.
Yeah, I would
even
probably agree with
even
that.
with TJ, slowing down. I think Highsmith and Herbig are still awesome players in their own right too. So, but in terms of, like, looking down the pike, though, absolutely, this is the most talented and promising group that the Steelers have to offer.
Yeah, this is one of those few positional groups on the Steelers, and really is, like, outside of this and edge, maybe interior defender, because I do like some of the promise that's there as well, even though it's going to be a big blow when they lose Cam Hayward here eventually.
Right.
But the offensive line, Shayne, if I truly compare it to the rest of the league, I don't think that the Steelers are better than every offensive line.
No.
But I think if you had to swap them out, I'd be really hesitant to swap them out for most lines in the league, because the average age is like 24 years old of the top 5, if you include Ionicher and Dunker into that group of 5 now. And then looking towards the future, it's like, I don't know, like, in 2028, is there going to be 3 or 4 offensive lines in the league that I'm going to like more than this? And maybe they don't develop the way that we plan. But I'm very excited about the addition of James Campen. I think that that's a massive improvement over Pat Meyer. Jari Evans as well, I think is a solid coach.
He's fascinating too, to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, former All-Pro NFL player, but I am really optimistic about maybe not 2026 so much, because I do think there's going to be a lot of growing pains, but the future with this group. There's probably not a lot of lines. There's probably, I can count on probably one hand the number of offensive lines I would exchange it for, if you're saying the whole scope of things, like in the future and beyond.
Yeah, and I think the key thing with the Steelers with this group, before we move on, like, you have right now, without assuming nothing changes that we already don't know, you have a all-pro caliber center, in my opinion.
I agree.
Zach Frazier. You have an above average tackle who I think has even more upside to grow further, especially if he moves to left tackle, Troy Fautanu, and an above average guard, Mason McCormick. That's your starting point. Like, those are things that we've seen and put into action and actually can believe in to some degree. And then you have 2 rookies who both were projected to be, top 60 picks in the case of Jennings Dunker and Max Ionicher, who might not play right away, but have the upside to be above average players at their positions. And then from there, you have depth that most teams don't have. Brock Hoffman's a really good depth player. Spencer Anderson has proven to be a really good depth player. Dylan Cook, when he's been asked to play, has been better than a lot of swing tackles can be asked to be. Broderick Jones is going to be a depth player potentially for this team. Most teams just can't say that, right? Like, that's the key thing here, is that if you lose 2 guys, most offensive lines crater when you lose 2 players. I don't necessarily think that would be the case if the Steelers lost 2 players before the season. I think you could still feel relatively comfortable with the starting lineup, even if you lost 1 or 2 guys. That is very valuable for an NFL team, because most offensive lines just frankly don't stay healthy. Like, that's just, it's really hard when you're that big and hitting people that often. Like, you're going to get hurt probably. So it's really good to know that there's as much depth that there is on this team.
Yeah, agreed. It's a strong unit overall. It's an arrow pointed up unit for sure.
Yes.
I did write an article on Mason McCormick this morning over on Steel Curtain. You can go check that out on him being underrated and overlooked. And Brian Baldinger did a breakdown
Mhm.
on his film. And I think there's a ton to get excited about, even with Mason McCormick, even entering year 3. So it's just an encouraging group overall. From the highs, the heartbreaks, every headline. This is the Steel Curtain Podcast, your source for Steelers talk, powered by SteelCurtain.com and the voices at Fansided. All right, Shayne, let's kick it over to the defensive side of the ball. Interior defensive line. Again, another really strong group overall. Did not perform the way that we had hoped last year. Obviously, 2 MCL sprains for Derek Harmon, their first round pick, did not help that situation. Y.A. Black has some growing pains. You hope that he can take a year 2 jump. Harmon can stay healthy this year. They added Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, he's a quality rotational defensive lineman. I think the depth is really solid overall. And assuming that these guys can stay healthy, you're looking at a quality group here, even if Cam Hayward maybe takes a step back at age 37 this year.
Which we cannot guarantee, because we can't guarantee anything with that guy. Yeah. Honestly, I think until his legs literally just give out on him, he's just too damn strong. Like it doesn't matter if he doesn't move as well as he used to, because he just basically carries guys to the quarterback and carries them to the ball carrier. Like, it doesn't matter. But yeah, assuming Cam is similar to what we've seen from him in the past, which is, basically an all-pro caliber player, this is one of the better units in the league at this position, and honestly one of the better units on the Steelers as well. Like, I think they go 4 deep comfortably with guys I trust, and that's including, Derek Harmon, who did miss time last year, but I do think is a really talented player. I believe in Keanu Benton from a talent perspective. He just isn't always used the way we'd like, as we discussed earlier. You have Cam, obviously, and then Sebastian Joseph Day is a proven commodity in this league. Like, he is a quality. If he's your 3rd or 4th player, which in this case you hope he's the 4th player in this group, with Harmon and Benson still sticking around and playing well, that's a really good place to be. Like, it just is. So just off the top 4. And then you have Y.A. Black, who you hope can take a step up. Sezi Odatamiwo played pretty well when he was asked to last year. Like, I think that's a guy that you can have on the roster and feel good about as your 5th or 6th guy. And they draft Gabriel Rubio. I'm interested in Kevin Jabody Jr. a little bit. He was fascinating last year as kind of like a pass rusher in his last season with Syracuse. Logan Lee, who kind of gets forgot about because he unfortunately hasn't really done anything, but he's still around. And then they signed Dean Lowry just because, right? Like, I don't know how to feel about that. I did write about that yesterday when that news broke. I have a take on that later that we'll get to, but this is a very deep unit that has a lot of veteran talent and also young guys you can get excited about.
Yeah, it really is. Let's go over and talk about edge, and we won't spend much time on it.
Nope, we know what this group's about.
Yeah, I mean, TJ Watt, we have been saying this from the beginning, Shayne, as unfortunate as the last year and a half or so has not been the same TJ Watt that he has been in the past. It's just, that's just the fact right now. And we hope that maybe he can get a little bit of a boost as he enters age 32 season now. He's getting up there. And unfortunately, this is the scale. This is the kind of the curve that we see with other guys who are similarly great players. Khalil Mack, like, it happens to even the best of them. But even if that decline continues this year, or if it stays neutral with Patrick Graham here, regardless of what happens, Alex Highsmith is still really good and somehow underrated. Nate Herbig is still somehow underrated as well, with as good as he is coming off the bench in particular. It's a really strong group. Jack Sawyer rounding it out. The playmaking, splash play ability. Like, I think that this is still a strong group when compared to the rest of the league, but it does have a chance, I think, to be a little bit underwhelming depending on which version of Watt you get this year, because as other guys are getting younger, fresher, you look at like the Houston Texans, like that group was phenomenal last year. So the Steelers weren't on par with that. They were a tier below that for sure. But I do at least have reasonably high hopes for that edge group this year.
Yeah, I think the key here is you have 3 players who, even if you factor in the fact that TJ Watt is no longer a tier 1 pass rusher, you have 3 guys who defenses have to worry about at edge, which many teams don't have that. That's just kind of the reality. And especially guys who are like legitimately concerning to go up against, not just, it's a good player. Like, we have to block him up pretty good. 3 guys who legitimately can make game-changing plays. And that's the difference between this edge group and a lot of other ones. It'd be great if TJ can get back closer to what he's been, but I don't really have a reason to expect that. Part of the problem with him, and it's something that we probably didn't talk enough about even when we were concerned about extending him, he's not a power player, right? Like, he's not a power rusher in really any sense of the word. It's not really his game. And guys like that don't usually age very well, because once you lose some of that twitch, once you lose some of that ability to bend the corner, it kind of can go away a little bit. And I'm not saying that he's no longer a good player, but I think you are starting to creep into the territory of like, how much longer can he be an effective pass rusher and not just a really savvy one and a really savvy run defender on top of it. But you kind of go back to Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig, and you're like, just those two as starters would also be really good. So it's like, can you complain too much? Not really, but I would love, and unfortunately, I don't believe Sawyer's this player, and unfortunately, I wish he was. I do wish they had some sort of power element in this group. They really don't. Even Highsmith is not necessarily that kind of guy either. That's one thing I'd love to see them, maybe when they do move on from one of these guys, whether it's Watt in a year or two, or if it's Highsmith or whoever, I would love to see them add that element to this group in some way, shape, or form. But this is still one of the better units in the league whenever they're all healthy.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how this works out with Patrick Graham. If Graham's here for the long term, maybe there is a little bit of a dynamic shift in what they look for at the position. Maybe they will kind of go lean a little bit more closer to the 4-3 type of edge rushers rather than the 3-4 off the ball. Maybe they want a hand in the dirt guy. But for now, I think, again, pretty strong group overall, even considering, and it's hard to believe TJ Watt is entering year 10 already.
Yeah.
Where's the time gone? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, doesn't feel great, honestly.
No, it doesn't.
I'm not even old yet, but it's not great.
Off-ball linebacker, Shayne. Again, I think quarterback, off-ball linebacker, one of those you could argue is the weakest overall positional group on the Steelers, not only at the top, but with the depth as well. I think that the depth is at least respectable. You've had guys that have started in the past, like Malik Harrison, Cole Holcomb, but who are they at this stage of their careers? You've got Carson Bruner there for special teams purposes. We'll talk about him in our roster predictions. And the guys at the top, though, this is where it matters the most. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson. Can they get on the same page? Can they stop all the miscommunication errors? Can Patrick Queen learn how to wrap up in year 6? Like, you missed 21.4% of your tackles last year. It was a rough season for Patrick Queen overall. Allowed over 80 receptions and I think 5 or 6 touchdowns in the passing game. A lot of miscommunications. It was a sieve over the middle of the field. Like, that stuff has to be cleaned up this year. I'm not overly optimistic because the Steelers have the same exact group this year. And I do think that just the learning curve would tell us, like Peyton Wilson entering year 3, he's got a lot better chance to improve than a guy who is firmly in the middle of his NFL career and has taken more significant steps backwards than Patrick Queen. I am more optimistic about Wilson than I am about Queen. And I think that you and I kind of share in that sentiment there.
Yeah, the only way this group is better than last year is if Peyton Wilson takes a step up and plays not only as good, at least, as he did as a rookie, but better in a bigger role. Like that's really the key here to this group, because again, if you're someone who thinks Patrick Queen has been worth anything close to what the Steelers have paid him up to this point, so be it, but he's just not a quality linebacker in the NFL. He just isn't. And to me, because he's still going to be the primary linebacker for this team, there's only so much better this group can get. Even if Peyton Wilson takes a step up, unless Patrick Graham's able to hide him better and able to put him in a position to make plays better, which is totally possible. Like, I'm not going to roll that out as a possibility. Teams are just going to pick on him because they can, and they know they can. And that's just the reality of playing a linebacker. As many snaps as you play him and in the role that they've played him in, it's just easy to pick on him at times, right? So hopefully Graham can help mitigate that. I think if Peyton Wilson steps up, you can mitigate that. But I think that this unit is just a little bit capped because of the fact that Queen's going to be the primary linebacker, and the depth guys, if they have to play, I think are totally fine NFL depth, if not above average NFL depth overall. I'm also kind of curious if Carson Bruner can maybe translate some of that special teams stuff he did last year, which is very good, into maybe getting a chance to play on defense a little bit, because he fascinates me a little bit. But yeah, this group is unfortunately the same, and I don't know how much better it will really be.
Yeah, personnel is exactly the same, and you're hoping that the coordinator change and the coaching changes are what ultimately leads to a better season than we saw last year. We'll see. I mean, it's kind of that wait and see approach. I would have been totally on board going after a linebacker in free agency. I would have been on board replacing Patrick Queen. I know a lot of people on the Steelers side of the media don't share the same thought. I don't think he was good at all last year, and I think that he's a very replaceable player at this stage of his career. Obviously, you'd have to get a different green dot guy. Maybe that would be Peyton Wilson at this point. But I think that the results kind of spoke for themselves last year. And maybe, Shayne, the thought is here, you kind of hit rock bottom, like with how bad it was at linebacker last year. Maybe there's only space to go up from here. Hopefully with the coaching change, we can see that happen. Cornerback position, middle of last year, you got rid of Darius Slay, addition by subtraction. He was horrible. Don't sign 34-year-old cornerbacks ever.
Yeah,
I don't care what their past reputation was. I do not care. Don't ever sign those guys because you are toast. Your legs are toast. You're trying to keep up with some of the best athletes in the world. You just don't have it anymore. Who was it? The Patrick Peterson, a couple of years before that, didn't have it at that age. It doesn't matter your past reputation. So gone. He was already gone back in November, whenever that was. James Pierre took over, a really good second half of the season. He's now gone as well. Don't know how he's going to perform now. And he was just kind of such a mystery because a former UDFA, a guy that was a 4.6 guy coming into the NFL, probably a 4.7 something guy at this stage of his career. He turns 30 years old this season. He's not getting any faster. And so I think it was a bit of a dice roll, but the price was probably right to maybe go out and keep him. They did not. But I feel really comfortable with Joey Porter and Jamel Dean as your top two corners. In fact, this might be the best like press man coverage pairing of corner in the NFL. Maybe right now. I don't know how much Steelers are going to play that, but I really like those two. Obviously, you have Asante Samuel there. You have Brandon Echols still. You drafted Dalen Everett in the third round. And so a pretty quality group overall to some of the groups we've seen in years past.
Yeah, if Jamel Dean, who is somehow, despite closing in on 30, significantly younger than several of the cornerback additions the Steelers have made in the past 3 years, assuming he can keep that level of play for a year or two, I think this is definitely one of the better corner duos in the league with him and Joey Porter Jr. Now, again, specifically in like man coverage situations, I would say. So how much of that you see, we'll have to kind of see and wait and find out. But overall, this corner room, I think, is better than it was last year, obviously. And also, more importantly, I think it's a little bit deeper now that we have guys that we've seen play in this unit with Echols and Asante Samuel Jr. played well last year overall. You bring in Dean. You sort of have, and we'll talk about him in a second, but Ramsey's probably, from what I heard today, the slot corner for this team again, which is fascinating, I guess. We'll have to see how that works out. But that group in general should be at least a really solid one for the Steelers this year.
And that's my expectation for Ramsey as well. And you got Brisker back there in the back end. And so he could be that other safety for the Steelers. Deshaun Elliott, let's talk about that safety position.
Yeah.
If we throw Ramsey in there, I mean, call him what you want to right now. We'll see what the ultimate plan is for him.
He's
Elliott coming off of an injury. Brisker, really good depth signing, and obviously a guy that's capable of seeing starter snaps. Behind that, not a ton of depth. Right now, you've got Robert Spears Jennings. We'll see if he can carve out a role on special teams. The Sebastian Joseph Day, or excuse me, who am I thinking of?
Sebastian Castro.
Sebastian Castro.
Two Sebastians.
Wrong Sebastian in my head, right?
Which is fascinating, but whatever.
Yeah. Does he stick around for special teams purposes? I think that's a conversation at least to be had there. Played with the Steelers in 8 games last year after losing his roster spot with Tampa Bay. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Overall, I feel just okay about the safety position. These guys are, at least their top guys, kind of on the back half of their careers now, in the late stages of their careers. They might lose another step. That's not fun to do, but at least Brisker signing gives them a little bit more depth, security, and athleticism at the position.
Yeah, I think I'd feel a little bit better about this group if I thought Ramsey was going to be a safety most of the time, but it seems like that might not be the case. Because if you had Ramsey and Elliott as the primary guys at safety, and then you had Brisker as like a dime back or just a guy that comes in and maybe plays a little bit of that like linebacker overhang type of role sometimes, I'd be more fascinated with it. But if they're going to go with the Ramsey as the primary slot player, star, they're calling it, like a lot of defenses around the league do, it just gets a little weird with Brisker and Elliott as the true safeties then, because they're both more, in my opinion, like downhill players than cover safeties. But overall, I think that the safety group is far from bad. It's just I don't know how, like you said, deep especially it is, and also how they're going to kind of play all these guys, frankly. So
yeah, and quite frankly, I think that Ramsey should be a safety at this stage of his career. I really think that he should be. He's going to be.
Defense played better when he was a safety last year.
I think
which doesn't mean much, but
no, but I mean, again, age catches up with everybody. As awesome as he's been, he's going to be 32 years old in October, I think. Is he going to have the quick footedness enough to go the inside outside breaks? If you're being a slot corner, like, you can't be a step behind. You have to be very quick, very agile. Obviously, the read and reaction stuff is there. He's got good instincts, but when you're older, that's just what happens to guys, especially in the secondary. Nobody ages as fast as guys in the secondary, and that's the concern. Having a couple guys that are older, even Elliott pushing 30 now. I mean, and a guy that's had several big knee injuries. Like, what is he going to look like after those knee injuries that he had? And so definitely something to keep an eye on there. Special teams, mostly the same as what we've seen before. I'd be just kind of swapping Corliss Waitman for Cameron Johnson, a guy that maybe they should have just kept to begin with anyway. What's fascinating, Shayne, is they had a chance to trade Waitman for draft capital last year, and the Steelers chose against it. They chose to just cut Cameron Johnston and miss out on the opportunity to maybe get a 7th round pick or a day 3 pick swap somewhere. Again, it's not high draft capital, but it's something. They probably at the end of the day made the wrong punter choice anyway. Chris Boswell, coming off a bit of a down season, only converted 84.6% of his field goals last year. He's got to bounce back, especially getting a record-setting NFL contract. Like, that's not acceptable at that price tag anymore. I'm not a big fan of paying guys for past production. So Boswell better start kicking 92, 93% like he did the 2 years prior to that. It's just bad business. Like, it just is. And I feel like, is he deserving of it based on what he's done in his career? Yes. But you should have a forward-thinking mentality, kind of, and that's what they did not have with TJ Watt. Forward-thinking mentality. What is TJ Watt going to do at age 31, 32, or 33? Like, that's what you should be thinking, not what did he do for me in the past. And unfortunately, agents will not argue that. They will argue, this is what my client has done. I would have the counter argument, and I would say, sorry, I've got to look out for the future of this team, and I just can't hand out bad contracts. I think that paying Boswell was the right choice. Like, there's obviously you have to pay the guy, and you just hope that he has a bounce back season this year.
Yeah, I think the problem with kickers, it's harder to gauge that. And it's a lot harder to just assume, like, oh, well, we can find someone who can give us similar production much cheaper. Kickers are weird, man. Like, it's just, you never know. Like, it's really hard to know year to year for most kickers if they're going to be good. Like, even Boswell, like, he's had his mishaps in the past. He obviously had, I think it was, I forget if it was 2018 or 2019 season, but there's a season where he was like, 60-something% or whatever it was.
It was 65%.
65%, yeah.
It's rough.
So, like, it happens, right? Now, most kickers, if they have that type of season or they're that bad, they kind of just fall apart entirely. But Boswell has managed to become easily the best, kicker in Steelers history, but also one of the better kickers, really, period, that we've seen in the NFL in a long time. So you have to pay him. They did. Absolutely. I think it's going to work out fine. I think he'll be good. Like, a lot of the misses last year, admittedly, were like, all right, Mike, why are we like, what are we doing here with these kicking decisions? So we'll see, but I'm not really worried about him at all.
All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. Be sure to check out our written work on steelcurtain.com. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would love that as well. Like this stream. Leave us a comment down below. All right, Shayne, let's get to our way too early 53-man Steelers roster prediction as week 2 of OTAs ensues here. We can revisit this later on and see where we right on most things, where we way off base. Did we get like 99% of these right? Did we were off by 1 or 2 guys? I'm interested to see what you have. We'll kind of cross compare. We'll go right across positionally here as we wrap up this show with our roster predictions. So let's start with the quarterback position. Shayne, I can go first. I've got the Steelers keeping 3, not 4 quarterbacks because I don't have them. I'm not betting against the norm here. And I don't think that guys like Mason Rudolph and Will Howard are too talented that the Steelers can afford to do that and keep that 4th position to reserve 2 is as important as quarterback is. I just don't see them delegating the resources there. I have the Steelers going with Aaron Rodgers, QB1, Will Howard, QB2, and Drew Aller as the developmental, don't get a helmet unless we have to call you up for emergency, QB3, which means Mason Rudolph is the odd man out. The Steelers either release him outright or look for a trade, late round pick swap, another position, whatever you will by the time roster cut downs happen. Do you have the same 3, Shayne?
I do, and I mostly to keep my own sanity because I refuse to have had to I refuse to have had to talk about Will Howard as much as we've had to in the last like
Yeah.
4 months, and then just not let him be on the roster. Like
Right.
I just don't believe that. I think that there's no reason at this point to keep Mason Rudolph for about 50 reasons, but the most important one being we know what he is. With the other two, Aller and Howard, we don't know. And if something does happen to Aaron Rodgers, I would much rather find out what we have in one of those two guys than just make Mason Rudolph trot out there and lose probably half the games that he plays. So we'll see what happens with that. But I would really be upset if that's not the three that we keep, though.
Yeah, and again, I want to preface this is our predictions of what the Steelers will do. It's not even our preferences, although that would be my three preference now that Aaron Rodgers is here. Yeah. We cannot rule out the possibility of Mason Rudolph being the QB2. I wrote about this. The Steelers, more than any team in the league, they are present-minded. They care about what's happening right now. And in a pinch, is there a scenario where Mike McCarthy and the coaching staff might be more comfortable with Rudolph entering the game for a 2 or 3 game, or entering the season for a 2 or 3 game stretch, more so than Howard, who has not taken an NFL snap, was a former 6th-round pick, had the wrist injury last year. Like, there's a scenario where they just flat out trust Rudolph more and they go that route and they say, yeah, we think that Howard is expendable, or we'll try to get him back on the practice squad. I don't agree with it. I think the philosophy is bad because you're too focused on here rather than looking for the future. I'd like to at least see what you have in these guys. And I'm not one that believes that Howard is a franchise quarterback, but I'd rather go with the youth and uncertainty of Howard rather than the certainty of Rudolph's mediocrity.
Yeah, before we move on to running back, I have a quick counterpoint to the idea of like, well, what if they really just want to have a trusted veteran? Are you telling me we couldn't get Cooper Rush on the practice squad?
Yeah, exactly.
Are we sure we
if
could?
you really wanted that, you could do that.
Like, if you really aren't 100% sure Will Howard's ready to go, are we sure Cooper Rush couldn't just kind of be on standby? Like, I kind of think he probably could. And not saying that there's like a guarantee that he's as good as Mason Rudolph, but like at that point, are we really caring that much if we're splitting hairs? That would be my move, honestly. Is to do that.
And then there's the whole thought, Shayne, that if Rodgers goes down for significant time, your season is done anyway.
Yeah, it's over anyway.
Then you might as well get your young guys out on the field. So it's kind of a win-win to do that. So Shayne and I are in agreement. Aaron Rodgers, Will Howard, Drew Aller, those are the 3 quarterbacks the Steelers will keep, at least in terms of our early projections here, which means Rudolph is the odd man out. Let's go to running back position, Shayne. Who do you have making the team at running back for the Steelers, and how many?
So in terms of pure running backs and guys who aren't like, the fullback type of guy like Nowakowski, I have them in the tight end group. Just 3: Jaylen Warren, Rico Dowdle, and I'm not willing to believe they're going to cut Caleb Johnson quite yet.
Okay.
I think that being a 3rd-round pick and being in a new system, I don't think he's going anywhere pure, like in terms of being truly cut. Like, is there a chance that a team comes calling and they decide, you know what, we're comfortable with our top 2 guys, let's get something back for him while we can? Maybe. But I think unless that happens, they're going to just ask him to play special teams a little bit more, do that type of stuff, see if he can do that, and be that 3rd back in the waiting in case of an injury.
Shayne, we're already at a difference here because I have the Steelers keeping 4.
I figured.
Again, actual running backs like Jaylen Warren, Rico Dowdle. I do have them keeping Caleb Johnson. I think that it's just way too early to give up on that 3rd-round pick. We'll at least see what we have here. And then I have them keeping Travis Homer as well, the special teams ace. Danny Crossman, new special teams coach. Is he going to want his version of what like the Steelers previously had in a Miles Killebrew, a guy that you can just go out there and trust to be an every down player, basically on all phases of special teams? I think that Homer could potentially do that. That's what he did in Seattle. It's what he did in Chicago. So even though I maybe don't value his special teams as much as the Steelers have in the past, and I might want to allocate that resource elsewhere, I see a very possible path for Travis Homer to join this team. And so already right there, I have 4, you have 3. So I'm interested to see where you went with that extra resource. Wide receiver position, Shayne, I can go first this time. I've got 6 wide receivers making the team. Mike McCarthy in the past has been pass happy. Now, regardless of what the Steelers say and their willingness to be dedicated to the run, I do think that there is a paradigm shift post Mike Tomlin. Excuse me. When it comes to McCarthy, I've got the Steelers keeping DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman Jr., Jeremy Bernard, Roman Wilson gets one more chance here, Ben Skoranek for special teams purposes, and Caden Weegan for special teams purposes, who we will at least label him as a receiver.
Yeah, I have Actually, the same group here. So I have again Metcalf, Pittman Jr., Bernard, Weegen, Wilson, Skronik, and someone notably missing from both of our lists, Eli Heidenreich.
Yeah.
Um, I this is where we can talk about him since
Yeah.
both of us have him off. I think he will be a practice squad player to start his career, mostly because I think coming from that Navy offense and having to develop as an NFL player, I just don't know if they're going to feel comfortable having him play a role early on. I think they want to give him the chance to develop either as a running back or as a receiver or a little bit of both. But just I think it's a lot to ask a seventh round pick coming from Navy to come over and have an actual role on this team, unless he's maybe a demon on special teams in the preseason or something like that, where like
Yeah.
he can actually like win a spot not via his offensive ability but through special teams. I think he's probably a year away from being a contributor to this team.
Yeah, and sadly, I do agree with you there. I have him starting his career on the practice squad. The Steelers should be able to get him there. I mean, barring a spectacular preseason, he nearly fell out of the 7th round and went
Right.
undrafted. And so teams are going to have guys that they like. I don't see him getting post, so that's probably where he's going to begin his NFL career. Shayne, tight end, how many and who do you have?
So I have 4. The 4th name is kind of a placeholder, but I went with one of the guys on the roster for now, but I could see it being anyone really. But this is where I kind of, instead of having 3 tight ends and 4 running backs, I have 4 tight ends and 3 running backs right now. It could go either way though.
Okay.
Obviously Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington, Riley Nowakowski is the fullback H-back type, and then I threw Lake McCree out of USC. They had in the undrafted pool for now, but again that could be easily replaced by insert veteran, third tight end here,
sure.
right? But that's, I think 4 is probably where they start the season with.
All right. I also went with 4, Darnell Washington, Pat Fryermuth, Riley Nowakowski, and JJ Galbraith, considering he was here last year. And maybe that's just enough to edge out the rest of the competition, which feels a little bit underwhelming. Like we said, tight end is a position. Possibly the Steelers could cut corners. Maybe they would consider keeping just 3, but that's a lot to ask of Nowakowski in the event of an injury, and he suddenly has to step into a big role as a 5th round rookie there. Offensive line, Shayne, 8 or 9? That's the question here. Who do you have going with? I have the Steelers keeping just 8 offensive linemen, and I'll lead with this. I've got Broderick Jones on PUP to start the season. So until I see that maybe he's healthy enough, we'll go down to 8. And that's where I cut a little bit of a corner. Maybe you have 9 here. My 8 offensive linemen: Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier, Max Yonicher, Jennings Dunker, Dylan Cook, Brock Hoffman, Spencer Anderson. I think a really quality group overall, good depth. You're sitting pretty if like Hoffman and Anderson are your 7th and 8th offensive linemen. I think that will give them plenty enough comfortability, if you will, to start the season with those guys. Now, absolutely, they could keep 9. They've kept 9 in the past. I wouldn't be shocked if they went that route. If Broderick is not healthy enough, I have a hard time finding a 9th player worthy of taking a roster spot from someone else when you already have a good group and a deep group, and you already have position flexible guys like Cook can tackle guard versatility. Hoffman has tackle center versatility. Spencer Anderson has guard center versatility. Or excuse me, Hoffman has guard center versatility. I might have said that wrong. But you got guys that can wear multiple hats. That's good enough for me to just have 3 backups there to start the season.
Yeah, I think we kind of did the same thing where I have the same 8 and then I have Broderick Jones, but with the caveat that I expect him to start on the PUP list. So you could honestly, take Broderick Jones off my list, put in either another offensive lineman, or maybe throw in Travis Homer like you had running back or whatever it may be. But same idea of, I think the 8 we know for sure, in my opinion. And then it's just, is Broderick healthy, right? And if he's not, do they choose to keep an extra lineman, or do they have that spot be taken up somewhere else for now? But in general, we have the same idea, just with me having Jones technically making the roster.
All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the football. And this is one, Shayne, where I'm interested to see if we have the same amount of players that align and who those players are. I've got the Steelers keeping 6 interior defenders. I think that considering the depth of the group and the fact that you went out and signed Sebastian Joseph Day, who's been a former starter, and now he comes in and is your 4th defensive lineman, like, I feel really comfortable with that group of 6. And again, the guys who missed the cut here, theoretically, you should be able to bring them up from the practice squad. They don't need to have a spot on a game day roster. So I've got Cam Hayward, Derek Harmon, Keanu Benton, Sebastian Joseph Day, Y.A. Black, and Azizi Ademewo. rounding out that group. Do you have the same group of 6?
I do have the same group of 6, and I think specifically Gabriel Rubio is someone who probably should start in the practice squad to start his career because his biggest issue is he didn't play a ton at Notre Dame. So I think having him kind of slow play it, make sure he gets himself ready to go as an NFL, player and NFL body, that makes a lot of sense. And I think they did sign Dean Lowry. I think he is a quintessential at this point, like practice squad veteran guy at this point.
Yeah.
Having him around when he has experience with Mike McCarthy and he has experience with Patrick Graham for 1 year, at least in 2018. I think that makes sense for them, but I don't expect him to have an actual game day role, in my opinion. So I would have the same 6 as you.
I do think that we could have a really potentially interesting battle for IDL 6 here for the Steelers.
Yes, there is chances there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, guys that all kinds of different body types. Like there's Ademawo, there's Dean Lowry, the veteran who has starting experience in the past now that he's recovered from that knee injury. There's Logan Lee, who I mean, at least the Steelers initially liked. I don't know where he is with them right now. And then there's Gabe Rubio, the Steelers rookie, who maybe potentially the stoutest of this group. And so if they're looking for just a pure run defender, maybe he slides in there as well. But we are in agreement on the 6 the Steelers will keep on the interior defensive line. Edge rusher, I'll spend seconds talking about this because they only ever keep 4. I don't, even though there's a new defensive coordinator and Mike Tomlin is not here anymore, there's a chance that you can keep a 5th. I love to have a healthy rotation of edge rushers. The Steelers don't like to deploy historically a healthy rotation of edge rushers. They like to overwork their stars and not get a big enough rotation on the field. But I've got 4. It's TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, Jack Sawyer. There's not even a 5th on this roster that I would even deem in consideration to make the team.
And that's the thing, is I would be willing to consider finally moving off of the 4 prediction, but they didn't do anything to suggest that they're going to do that. Now, if they go sign like a veteran edge rusher at some point, then you have to kind of be like, oh, it's going to be 5 then. Because they're probably not cutting Jack Sawyer, or at least even though I'm not a fan of him, I think that would be really dumb to do at this point in his career. Yeah. So you're going to keep those 4. It's just whether a 5th one emerges. Right now, there's no reason to think that that's the case. So I also have the same 4.
All right, the group of linebackers. And then we kind of already tipped our hand a little bit here with this group, but I've got 5. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Cole Holcomb, Malik Harrison, and Carson Bruner as your 5th and final guy, rounding out with his special teams ability. Do you have anybody different in that group, Shayne?
Nope, that's the 5. And again, like Bruner was really good on special teams last year. I don't think he's going to not make the team. So the guy who I think is the most potentially in contention to not be on this team is Malik Harrison. First of all, terrible number change. What are we doing, Malik? That's
50 to 39. Yeah.
Terrible. But assuming he makes the team, I think that's the 5. And if not, he'd be the one I'd be looking at to maybe see them swap somebody out for it, but we'll see.
Yeah. So again, barring some sort of like veteran signing here, I feel pretty comfortable with that group of 5. I think it makes the conversation pretty easy, as opposed to maybe if the Steelers had drafted like an early day 3 linebacker or something. Now you're talking, does he make it over Bruner? Would he make it over one of the veterans? At this point, I think pretty comfortably those 5. And I do think that 5 is the magic number there. It's what they've kept in years past. And so we're going with that again. Shayne, how many corners do you have the Steelers keeping and who are they?
Technically 5, because I'm counting Jalen Ramsey as a safety. So Joey Porter Jr., Jamel Dean, Brandon Eccles, Asante Samuel Jr., and Dalen Everett, I think, are all locks. And I don't think a 6th one sneaks in there unless you're counting Ramsey as a corner.
Okay, I do have an extra safety being devoted, or excuse me, corner at this position. Porter.
Can I guess real quick?
Yes. What's that?
Can I guess who it is real quick?
Go ahead.
Dante Kent?
It is Dante Kent.
Okay.
So after spending his rookie season on IR, former Steelers draft pick, a guy that had some special teams ability as well. And I think that's mostly the reason why they drafted a guy like Dante Kent. And so I think that this could be one of those Danny Crossman maybe saying, hey, can I get my guy in here? I'd like to have another guy that can be gunner, jammer, whatever you want. I think that, and again, I don't feel confident in this, but just looking at the group as a whole, 6 feels like a number that gives you plenty of depth at the position. And knowing that the safety position thins out pretty quickly here too, maybe they devote an extra corner to safety. I think it could go either way, but I have Dante Kent, the same guys you mentioned, plus Dante Kent a guy that didn't really get a chance. Season was cut short. And again, I got to mention one more time, it saddens me, Corey Trice's career, that came to an end with the Pittsburgh Steelers recently. He was released. Guy just could not stay healthy.
Nope.
And at this stage of his career, it's like, I totally get it. I totally get it. You took that swing. You gambled on him in the 7th round because he was a day 2 talent in my mind. But when you have multiple serious injuries that cause you to miss so much time, and knowing that if he stuck around, he would have to play special teams, where ironically, he like pulled his hamstring right off the bone this past season. It might have been the season before that even. It was just a rough situation. They gave him a chance, didn't work out. Let's run with Dante Kent and see what we got. So those are my 6. Safety position, Shayne. I've got 4 here. And if we're counting Jalen Ramsey as a safety / nickel defender, he's 1. Deshaun Elliott and Jaquan Brisker. Maybe those 3, the combination of the 3 see the field often in what could be a maybe nickel heavy defense. And then Robert Spears-Jennings. I don't have more than this, but I do have Spears-Jennings. He is fast and physical, if nothing else. Kind of turns like a tugboat at times, and I don't know how good his instincts are. But if you're a gunner and jammer, that's kind of what you need overall, is just speed and ability to tackle. And he does have those things. So I have him making the squad as maybe a special teamer there with one of my final roster spots.
Yeah, and that's where we differ ultimately. This is the final difference here that gets us set up. I have 5. And to be fair, one of them is like, he's kind of a spot. Well, I'll talk about it. So obviously Jalen Ramsey, Deshaun Elliott, Jaquan Brisker, Robert Spears-Jennings. I agree. I think he's going to be a great special team player for this team. I do like him in that role. Darnell Savage ?
It's so hard. And again, like we probably should have mentioned that. By the way, if you're wondering what's the deal with Darnell Savage, he still has not signed a contract with the Steelers, despite his agent being adamant that he was going to show up and sign. We've been waiting around forever at this point. And I just don't know if we can trust him to be here. But I would agree with you, Shayne, if he does sign and the Steelers, he ends this holdout or whatever the situation's going on here, he ends up signing, I would definitely slot him in there as well, just because of his NFL experience, and he's a good athlete.
Yeah. So like my question is, if they don't sign Darnell Savage, the fact that they were going to, does that mean they do just go sign someone else that's also a veteran safety? So I put it with like a question mark of like, if he signs, yes. If not, is this just a different person with the same profile? So I'll say I'm sticking to my 5 regardless of whether he signs. It's just, who's that 5th guy going to be then technically? That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think they want another true safety. It's just, who's that actually going to end up being?
It's kind of an odd situation because he doesn't have the pedigree or anything at this point.
What I thought I remember hearing was that he was dealing with like an injury, so he was waiting to sign once he could pass his physical or whatever. So maybe he doesn't think he's going to pass his physical yet, so he's waiting. I don't know. Point is, we'll see if he signs, but if he doesn't, I'm sure at some point they're going to pivot, if I had to guess, and just bring someone else in maybe. So.
All right. And that puts me at 50, Shayne. And so my final 3 for my specialists would be, no surprise here, Chris Boswell, Cameron Johnson, and Christian Kuntz, the long snapper. Those are my 3 specialists. Obviously, I could have very well just slotted Caden Weegan here in special teams instead of receiver, because quite frankly, that's where he's going to get more snaps. I'd be shocked if he didn't. But those are the guys I have to round out my roster.
Yeah, and only one difference here for us, and it's, so I have Chris Boswell, obviously, I have Christian Kuntz. I just put not Cameron Johnston, because I don't believe him as a punter in this league anymore, based on what he did last year. It's limited, but he was not good last year, like truly tremendously bad last year. So I think he's like the veteran placeholder that they trust. But I have a feeling whoever it ends up being, I don't know if it's someone that they're going to bring in or they already have, because I don't even know if they have another punter on the roster right now. I forgot to double check. I just have a hard time thinking he's going to be this team's punter at this point. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's after that knee injury. I mean, it was some tough sledding for him there. You had some massive boots back in his Houston
days, but it's just last year with the small sample size was bad.
You wonder, like, and again, I think the Steelers will give him every opportunity. I think there will be competition there, but another year removed from this, I know like he's not the youngest guy or anything, but another year removed from a season-ending injury, maybe that could kind of work in his favor there, and he gets some of that back. But yeah, I'll be interested to see. That's you raise a good point with him there. So maybe that one, just kind of leave that at question mark, and we'll see what happens. I would slot him in there, at least right now, for the lack of competition.
Yeah, right. It would be him right now if the season started, but I just have a feeling something's going to happen there. It just feels like that. So.
All right. What do you guys think? Do you agree with our roster predictions? Disagree? Let us know. Leave us a comment down below. Is there anything that you would disagree with? And Shayne, one more thing I just want to mention really quick. My most notable names who missed the roster, I'll just list them off really quickly. Broderick Jones, who begins on PUP, and we'll see the spinal fusion is really tricky. Asante Samuel had it, missed half a season the following year. Mason Rudolph misses the roster. Eli Heidenreich, Gabe Rubio, Dean Lowry, Logan Lee, Sebastian Castro. Those are my most significant names who do not make my early Steelers roster prediction.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same, but a lot of the same names. I had Broderick, but again, could be the same situation. Again, like I didn't have Travis Homer on my list, even though I think he very well could make this team over like a fourth tight end potentially, as a special teamer. So we'll see about that. But for now, I feel like 3 running backs is where they're going to end up, but we'll see.
All right, let us know what you guys think. This is the Steel Curtain Podcast. It goes live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check out Josh Yorsh and Mark Powell show going live on Mondays at 1:30. Shayne joins them usually as well, always. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain Podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Steel Curtain Steelers podcast. Make sure you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts as well. And thanks again for listening to the Steel Curtain Podcast.